Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And today, before I get started, I want to send out my condolences to some family friends whose father passed away suddenly last week without any real indication, just dropped dead at the health club. Typical situation, trying to stay healthy, and it killed him. But he would have laughed about that. He was an old golfing buddy of mine, and it really saddened me to hear that he'd passed away because he had just retired and he was looking forward to a long life on the golf course and playing around, but that's not going to happen. So my father, Frank, when he was an accountant for years and years and years, and a client would pass away, he would always tell me, he says, never retire. He says, because within 6 months, almost all of my clients who retire pass away from something or another. They either are bored, they're worn out, or they do something stupid. So he says, never retire, always have something to do that day and never be idle. And I've always tried to live that way, and I always try to go to bed at night trying to think about what it is I need and want to get done the next day and try to plan that ahead, and so that I stay focused on always progressing and moving forward and building things and not just sitting idle. So my condolences go out to these folks. They know who they are, and I'll hopefully be seeing you this Saturday at the services. So thank you for indulging me on that. So I want to talk today a little bit about things that are overprocessed in our lives. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when you take something that's natural and had a good beginning on its own, it was perfectly fine as it was, but somebody comes along and decides to, before they serve it to you or put it into use, they want to process it and make it better. This happens a lot with our food. It's been happening with our government for years. Simple basics would get us by, but in light of their infinite wisdom and job creation, they've decided to amplify these simple tasks that government should be providing, which is safety and security and a strong dollar, so that commerce can go about and we can go about our lives building and creating things as we were designed to do. But somewhere along the way, some technicians, if you will, got involved, and they've made the process a little bit more substantially complicated. So let's go talk about the first thing that's a real easy thing to target as far as things being overprocessed. That would be your food. And I've always, tried to talk, and, there's different conflicting opinions on it. But I said, if you can't hop, skip, or jump from the outside wall of the grocery store into the interior, if you go past that to go get your food and supplies, you've gone too far, because all the fresh things around the outside edge. Now, I had somebody in the grocery business tell me that that's not altogether true, and that's right. There's going to be some things that might be down your bakery aisle and things like that are standard items that haven't been overly processed, and they're fine to eat, and they're not going to kill you in the long run. They're going to sustain you. But a lot of these other things that are in triple layer packages of foil and inside a box and inside a bag inside of that, those things are processed to the hills and back. So what you want to do is you want to stay away from those things. They've also been made sort of addictive in their consumption. And why do I say that? I said, well, back in the 1970s, and a lot of you may not have been around at that time, but I was. And it really started in the 60s, where people started talking about the dangers of cigarette smoke. And I remember it was a big thing when the Surgeon General mandated that warning go on the sides of cigarette packs. And boy, did people ever get upset about that. And then it had to go on top of the billboards that were on the highways to remind people that, cigarettes can kill you. But it was always small down at the bottom. It was sort of an afterthought, but it maintained the legal directive that had been given to them. Well, at that time period, when these executives at these major tobacco brands saw that the government initiatives were going to eventually cut into their profits and cut into their ability to maintain their level of growth and just sustain their operations, they decided to pivot and to go into another field. And so what they did was they targeted food, processed food. And so they ended up buying into the manufacturing and large food packagers. And when they did that, they brought with them their team of experts in addiction. So anyone who's had to kick a smoking habit knows how difficult cigarettes are to kick. And there's a reason for that, because these technicians, these scientists, these lab people made the cigarettes more and more addictive. They even had levels of entry for the cigarettes to be one brand, then move on up the line. And as I was studying this, there was a fun fact that I'll lay on you here. And a lot of people think about Marlboro cigarettes as being for, the manly man out there. Well, what a lot of people wouldn't realize, and you might think I'm full of crap when I say this, but Marlboro was one of the original filtered cigarettes. It may have been the original filtered cigarette. And it came out in the early 1900s. And it was marketed as a ladies' brand because it had the filter. And that would cut down the tars and the residue that would line up on their fingertips and on their lips. The men still typically smoked either something they rolled their own or they had an unfiltered cigarette was their preference. But the Marlboro brand started out as a ladies' brand. And as a story was told to me that we ended up having a couple of world wars, World War I and World War II. And as part of the rations that were handed out to the GIs, there would always be a couple of packs of cigarettes in there. And sometimes they were always the same and sometimes they changed. But Marlboro ended up being one of the brands that ended up being in these ration kits. And I think it was probably in World War II where it really took on. And the men were sort of mocking each other about, smoking those ladies, sticks, cigarettes. And some of the guys would pinch the filters off, pitch those away, so they just have an unfiltered tobacco cigarette. But after World War II, the executives at Marlboro decided they needed to change things because the ladies weren't buying the cigarettes as much, and they already had these men who were familiar with that taste in their brand. And so what they did after World War II, they set about to rebrand the Marlboro cigarette. And that's when they came up with the Marlboro Man. It was right after World War II, and they did a pivot to try to change the audience for that particular brand to the men. And so they made it a manly man's cigarette, the cowboy on the horse, all that kind of good stuff, the Tom Selleck mustache. I think Tom Selleck actually was a Marlboro Man for a while. So there's your prototype image there for the branding. So it's been a process all the way up and down the line. They change to mold themselves to the needs or whatever they see as the easiest entry into the marketplace to sell them something. And what they've done is they brought these scientists who were experts in addiction industry. And this is about the time in the 1970s when all this was taking place. And it was soon after that that obesity rates started going through the roof, especially in our children. Now, why is this of importance or interest to me? Well, back in grade school, and we had maybe 90 kids in my grade. I went to a small Catholic school, and for each grade level, there would be 3 classrooms. Each one would have 30 to 35 kids in it. And out of that group of 90 or so kids that were in my level, my grades population, there were only 2 of us that were the fat kids. I was one of them, and there was another kid. He knows who he was if he watches this. I doubt it. But there were 2 of us in the entire class of 90 people. And we both ended up working our way out of it as teenagers, and we both got fit and got healthy. But for those early years, out of all that class of kids, there was roughly maybe 2.5% of us were overweight and of a concern to the visiting doctor or to our parents or anything like that. The rest of the kids were, trim and otherwise, they would be looked at as being overtly healthy. But there were two of us that were the fat kids. And I know what it did to me, and I know what it did to my buddy. We felt it, and even though we excelled in athletics and things like that, we weren't as good as we could have been. But it hurt us emotionally, the way other people looked at us and how they treated us. So we took all the ribbing, took all the bad words, we took all the insults. And some of this actually came from some of the nuns who were supposed to be our teachers and safeguarders, but they were pretty nasty to us as well. Sometimes, maybe we had just started our lunch or something like that. Maybe had a couple bites of our sandwich. And I remember one nun went by and she says, "Don't you think you've had enough?" And I'm thinking to myself, okay. So I put the rest of my sandwich away and I felt bad and I didn't have my lunch. She probably thought I was on a second or third sandwich, but it was just one sandwich, and it was just mean-spirited. And whether she was having a bad day, she might have been, who knows, maybe she was of the age, maybe she was going through menopause and she was just being a bitch naturally. I don't know. But this was uncalled for, and it was just what we dealt with. So it concerns me today that the fat kids in the schools don't get this kind of treatment anymore, because the schools have stood up for them and say, you can't do that. You can't talk to those kids that way. They're normal. Well, they're not normal. They're unhealthy, and they need to be taken care of, but not in a derisive way. They need to be taken care of in a direct way, and that's to change the food, change the message that the body's taking in with all these addictive foods. And if you don't believe me, I've had one or two of these chips in my lifetime. I don't like them, but Pringles, potato chips. If you don't believe me, just look at the advertising on a can of Pringles potato chips. It will say, once you pop, you can't stop. And the reason is because they've chemically treated the product inside the can to stimulate the brain senses, the hunger senses, to have you just keep eating and driving yourself to eat more and consume more, because you never get satiated or feel full. And it's not a food you want to load up on, but it's supposed to be a companion to a sandwich or something like that, or a snack. But you're not supposed to eat the whole can. But a lot of people do. They consider that a serving. And not my judgment on it. I'm not in grade school. I'm not going to call them, fatso or anything like that. I just hope that they aren't hurting themselves and their family in the process here. So what has happened in the food industry has also happened in our government. Over the years since that time, I've seen a lot of buildup of these superfluous sort of agencies and building all these people into the employment ranks in these agencies. And these are the kinds of things that people are worried about now. They talk about the bureaucracy. And that was really the age of bureaucracy, was when it really sort of took off, and you had EPA and you had every other safeguarding agency off of that was built up. And, it's just crazy amounts of people. You have 14,000 people doing a job that they think maybe 200 to 300 people can do. Why is that? It's overconsumption, it's overprocessing, and what it does is it leads to poor health in our government. And this is what we're finding out now with all these DOGE audits that are going on. And you see right now, you don't notice the people on the conservative side of our population complaining about this. You do see people on the liberal side complaining very feverishly about this, that this is, the end of our government. It's all being taken down by a billionaire who really has nothing to gain. He's already gained everything he needs in life. And so I think their arguments really fall on deaf ears. And really what's happening is I do believe that the people out there, you folks and others like us, do know what the story is, and we're not going to take it. And we shouldn't be taking it. And we should be standing up and let this process work its way through so that we can have a healthier, more defined government that's leaner, lets us be more active in our own and get healthier in our own lives, rather than dealing with this sickness that sort of invaded our mental perceptions all throughout our world. Now, with our government, it's also invaded our news cycles. And so this is why when you can go from channel to channel to channel and you try to get what the story is, they're all using the same words, they're all using the same talking points, they're all using the same points to be made, which are hilarious a lot of times on the face of it. You know, I'm still trying to understand how the Nazis were such free speech people. That Margaret Brennan, boy, she really stepped in, and I don't know how she's going to get out of that. But her friends and people in the media will, they'll save her, and you'll see her back. She's not going to lose her job over that. Although it was something that would probably, to make that statement, would get you kicked out of a 6th grade history class and out of the principal's office. But just don't understand that. But there's a lot of people believe that, because it was fed to them, and this is what they're taking in as part of their diet. So we have to fix these things, but this is all part of what I was talking about in my earlier segments at the very beginning last year, when it was very important. I said that you need to know who you are, and this is where it's all coming true. All of you folks who determined who you were and what you were going to stand for at that time went through the year much more profitably and without problems in your lives. You didn't stop your processes. You didn't stop your progress. And whereas other people sort of flamed out on it, and they really haven't recovered yet. They're still having this tantrum, and I don't know if they're going to get out of it, but keep doing what you're doing. Stay on it. Stay supportive of these things, and stay vigilant, and don't take no for an answer if you know that the right answer is yes. Now, how does this, connect itself to Our Lady of America or religion or anything like that, or spiritual lives? Well, I would submit that the same thing has happened in our churches. And I'm not just talking about the Big C church, the Catholic Church, because there's plenty of it there. And I'll talk about that because that's what my personal experience is. But all the churches are kind of going through this, and they went through this process over the last 4 years. And some even started way before that. And they're all chasing the dollars. They're all trying to chase the survival of their churches because, as I've said before, attendance is diminishing. Donations are going down. And if you don't believe me on that, a lot of my Catholic friends might echo what I'm about to say, is that I find it very, very funny and timely that so many priests around the country came up with the same sort of talking point for their sermons the last week or two, when they've been saying that they want people to not give up on donating to Catholic Charities because Catholic Charities does such good work. They won't talk about the bad things that have happened by Catholic Charities and other NGOs. I mean, Catholic Charities isn't alone. There's, at least 10 major NGOs that were doing the same thing in human trafficking, bringing people into the country and then setting them loose and being paid by the government to do it. Catholic Charities needs to own this. They're part of it. They need to come clean on this. They still keep defying Congress for giving a full report on how the money's. There's a congressman down in Texas keeps pushing them on it. They keep telling them to go pound sand. This is not going to end well. This needs to be dealt with, and they need to come clean on this. Forgiveness is available, but they do need to come clean on this, I believe, before it becomes too late. But I don't know if they've got the stamina or the fortitude to do that, because I think like the media and other folks, they're going to hold on to their story as long as it takes, because They're after people in the churches to keep pushing the dollars in. Don't listen to what they're saying over here. We're doing good. Keep giving us money. Here locally in our diocese, we have a bishop's appeal going on again. This was supposed to have been a one-year deal, a one-time deal by Bishop Darcy almost 20 years ago, if not longer. He promised everyone it would be a one-year deal, and it's been every year. So that was a lie. And that wasn't something that was a miscommunication. That was a lie. And right now, at the same time we were being told to make sure we were giving money to Catholic charities to continue their work, we were also told that the bishop's appeal was down on its numbers and people needed to make sure they made those donations. Well, let me tell you what I think on that. I think the only way to really get these people's attention is through the pocketbook. Because if they're crying about this now, this soon, and that they're worried about the money drying up, then that's an issue for them. And if that's going to get their attention, I think what we need to do is kind of stick our finger in that wound a little bit and let them feel it. And let them understand, hey, you did this to yourself. And if you want our participation and our forgiveness, you will do the right thing. But right now, I don't see them doing that, and I get a lot of contact from other folks believe the same way. They're very, very concerned about this because if they don't take responsibility, just like the news media and just like the food companies and just like our government, if they don't take responsibility for their bad decisions and bad behavior, isn't anybody going to trust them anymore going forward. And we have a whole group, at least 2 generations of young folks coming in that are very, very super cynical about things. You say something, and then with a matter of moments, this dude comes out and they're fact-checking you. And that's going to bring a whole other set of circumstances here with AI coming in. But that's something we don't have to deal with yet today. We have to think about it. But what we do need to do is to get the attention of the folks in these organizations and let them know. Now, the way you get a hold of people in the food industry is you stop buying their breakfast products or their food products, things like that. You switch over to something else. You change the channel. Same thing with media and news people. You don't like what's being said. You think you're being played. Change the channel or don't watch at all. I think you're a lot healthier that way. You might be not as informed and on top of things, but that's not so bad either. The government, they owe us apologies too. They're going to be the last ones to come clean on things because their jobs are really at stake with that. And then we have our church leaders and our opinion leaders on those things if you don't go to church. We've got to hold them accountable. If they were wrong and if they're not telling us the truth, we need to let them know until they do. So one of the suggestions I had made to folks, they says, what do we do? What do we do? And I said, well, Lent is coming on. And with Lent, we're, as Catholics, we're supposed to try to give up something as far as Lent goes each year for that 40 days as we prepare ourselves for the renewal of Christ through his resurrection. Maybe we give up on putting that check in the collection envelope and maybe just put a couple bucks in it. Go back to the old pew tax sort of thing. Father Havel always told me that it cost 10 cents per individual to hold a mass, and for the time, the heat, and all like that. He said 10 cents per individual was the running cost of providing a mass to the parish. And I thought, well, if you only got 10 people there, that's only $1. And he says, well, it averages out over the Sundays when you have a packed sanctuary. But right now, I'd say maybe $1. So this is up to you. I'm just saying withhold the dollars. It's not that you have to do it permanently. You can always make it up at any time with your donation check. But hold that back, maybe put it in reserve. Be mindful of it and see how long it takes for the reaction to happen. I think it might be an interesting study to see how long it takes before the pulpits start crying for more dollars. It's not like they don't have the money. They took over, I believe the number was told was upwards of $9 billion so far by Catholic Charities alone. That's a lot of money. And we got to figure out where all this went and why the Catholic Charities took it upon themselves without a vote of its constituency to do something that in the end kind of comes back to hurt us as individuals. This is not something that was a positive in the rest of our lives. It might have helped a number of these people who gained entrance into the country, whether it be by illegal or a moratorium on things. But it was done maybe with good intentions, but bad result. And I still submit that Catholic Charities should do its work to try to help these folks, but help them at home. Help them in their own homes, in their own countries. Go and help them there so that they can thrive in their own communities and raise up all of their families, not just themselves. To travel such a great distance and split yourself off from your family and what you know is not the best answer, because what you end up doing is driving down the talent pool in those communities as well. So they end up suffering even more so, because you have to figure some of the more talented or driven individuals in their communities are the ones that were hopping on these buses and planes and taking the trip to the United States. So it's just all common sense stuff, folks. But you just have to watch the things that are overprocessed, these messages. I still have hope for the Catholic Church and all the churches to thrive, but I still see that the bad experience is coming. If we lose the momentum that we have going through with this administration right now, if the pendulum swings back the other way, I think it's going to hit so hard, it's going to collapse a lot of these things, because a lot of these folks on the left have already talked about trying to tax churches out of existence, to insult these people more and more and more, which they're already doing. So, they're going about their little war in their way, and it's unsavory, but it's happening. So the best way to deal with this is to know who you are, be patient, be consistent, and remember that I love you, and I'll be back.